1 Chronicles 13:2 and 3 says, David said to the assembly of Israel, if it seems good to you and is from the Lord our God, let us send everywhere to our kinsmen and who remain in the land of Israel, also the priests and the Levites who are with them in their cities and pasture lands, where they may meet us. And let us bring back the ark of our God to us. So we did not seek it in the days of Saul. Now, if you're joining us in reading through this 90-day reading plan, today's reading is 1 Chronicles 12:23-13:14. I encourage you to read that passage. Now, every endeavor we do, we should begin as a believer with the same way that David began, by moving the Ark of the Covenant. First, there should be an agreement between all those who are going to be involved in the activity. And secondly, we should assure this that it's God's doing or compelling us to move in that particular direction. If either of these two parts are left out, the project may be doomed to failure. This is particularly true if God is left out of the formula. Which brings us to an interesting dilemma that we might find in the church today. Many of us are not always as persistent as we should be in seeking God's will about an activity we want to try. We might try and do an outreach activity because God obviously wants us to outreach. But if God is not in that activity, then that activity is kind of doomed to failure. So how is it exactly that we can discover God's will and achieve success for what we're doing? I think the first thing we need to do is know the Scriptures. The more we know the Scriptures, the better we're going to be able to be prepared to present a plan that is consistent with what God would have us to do. And the second thing we need to do is we need to do something in such a way that it just mimics, that it doesn't mimic the popularity in the secular world. We're to be separate from the world. We are not to be tied to the world. And that doesn't mean that we'd have to go around dressed like we would in Jerusalem in the first century. That doesn't mean that we have to deny normal conveniences. But when you cannot tell the difference between a song that is dedicated to Christ and a song that's dedicated to something or someone else, then there's a problem. And finally, we need to be consistently reevaluating how things are being done. We need to understand that just because we did it this way 3 years ago, it shouldn't be done in the same way now. For example, it used to be, at least in the South, that Monday nights you'd go and you could expect a visit from somebody if you'd visited a church that previous week. That's not true now. Some of it's a result of societal pressures, but mainly people are very worried about strangers who are coming to the door. So plan out your activity. Make sure that God is an integral part of it, and then constantly evaluate the success and its methods.